Well, welcome back to another episode of Different Dadpreneurs, a show where we look under the hood of entrepreneurship and fatherhood. And super excited to have Jeff Pomietlarz on today, president of Class Drywall based in Ontario. And we'll get into a little bit of your story, which includes sobriety and a bit of a different lens on fatherhood and entrepreneurship and how that's impacted both. So super excited to have you. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I've been watching your podcast and I've been enjoying it. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on here. Thank you.
Yeah. We'll start with just setting a bit of context. Tell us a little bit about how long you've been in business and how you got into it in the first place.
So when I started this company, Glass Drywall, it was 5 years ago. We just had our 5 year anniversary. And the biggest part of the story is sobriety as well. I don't know if we want to get into that now, but we can. I had a previous business and it failed miserably. Drinking heavily and doing drugs and running a business doesn't really mix for some people, right? And I surrounded myself with negative people. I was a very negative person, and it was a failure. I ended up getting sober and I started this in April of 2019. Drywall is not my passion, but it's what I know most about in the trades. That's what I grew up doing. Whereas my first business was a GC. So it's the ego. I'll just start GCing jobs, right? Doing rentals. I had no clue what I was doing. So that's why that failed. When I started this, I had a partner, kind of my working mentor. So he taught me a lot in the drywall industry from years previous. And we had an opportunity to start a business, just time and material jobs, right? So with that, we would just charge ourselves out as subs. And we grew with that. And 5 years later, we have 16 employees with subs. And yeah, I got a nice office. I thought it would happen, right? So it's pretty crazy what the 5 years can bring you. But there's a lot of negatives and positives on the way, but it's all life learning ability, right? And skills from before when I wasn't sober. I would take those and put them in a negative. Now I have to. What I do is put them into a positive perspective. Don't make the same mistake twice, right? I try not to.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've got two boys. How old are they and at what point of your entrepreneurial journey did they come into the picture?
So they're 9 and 6. So my little guy was 1 when I started this company, and the other one was 4. And so when I had my other company, they were even younger, right? So when I started this, I think my wife was like, "Oh goodness, he's starting another company after he just became sober," and the other one failed miserably. But this is who I am, right? I'm not a big fan of working for people, whether it's ego or I don't know what it is, but I like to see the effort I put in. I like to see what I'm getting back, right? In that sense of an entrepreneur. And the boys, they've been a big part of it because when they were that young, again, my wife's amazing, so she took care of them more than anything at the beginning, and she still does. Let's be honest, probably like 70-30 in terms of responsibility. But now they're at the point where I can take them on the job site. They come scrap out houses for me on the weekends, and they love it. Right. So I want to get them involved in a trade whenever they can, because when I grew up, trades were kind of, I don't know how to say this properly, but I guess maybe beneath people, like I graduated high school 2020, 2003-ish. And if you didn't go to university, then you're kind of below grade, right? You're not doing well. So I pushed to university. I ended up going to college, but I should have done the trades thing eventually, right? So I was a tradesman. I always thought, because I like to do the hands. I can't sit in a room and listen, whether it's the ADD or anything like that. I like to keep going, right? So I should have gotten the trades really earlier. So I'm trying to get my kids, if they're interested, into the trades, and then that way they can have an option eventually,
Yeah.
right? But so they're a big part of the company too, and we keep it very family oriented. This company, my
Yeah.
wife's not involved with the company, but she helps with the charity work. Same with my boys too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've talked to quite a few entrepreneurs now. ADD and ADHD is
Wow.
surprisingly common, especially in the trades. My cousin's partner is an ADHD therapist. He has ADHD, but he grew up in a family that were in the trades. And it's surprising how prevalent that is. And I did want to go back to this story of sobriety and that path that you've been on, because I think it is an important perspective and kind of window into what people can be going through, because it's not talked about as often. There's a lot of shame that gets wrapped up in it. And I'd be curious, especially around the tipping point and what had you make change when you did. Just kind of going back to that tipping point of there were some habits there that probably weren't healthy. There was some stuff happening, but then you actually made a change. And what brought that about? Like, what were some of the circumstances or influences that helped you make that change?
Yeah, definitely. You see it a lot in the trades, right? Especially in the drywall's a little bit of a heavier in terms of physical trade, roofing, concrete, paving, stuff like that, carpentry, rough carpentry. And for me, when we say in sobriety, I hit a rock bottom, right? So my rock bottom, I ended up getting drinking and drugs are part of my story as well. So drinking and drugging at one point was a fun thing until it became a necessity. And that necessity ended up having me getting kicked out of my house when my youngest was just born. And eventually I had an overdose in my parents' basement. And that overdose opened my eyes to I needed to get some help. So that was my rock bottom. I'm sitting in, again, I can go on for hours about all my personal demons and all that, but is that brought me to the point where I got to get help or I'm going to lose my family, which is more even like I was so, I had no self-worth, right? And whether it was, I'm an only child, had a great family growing up, but up in here, I had no self-worth and it had nothing to do with the way I was raised, blah, blah, blah. I had suicidal thoughts when I was in grade 6 and 7, right? So I was born like that, right? That's just the way I was born. I have a different brain chemistry. So grade 6 and 7, back then, we didn't drink or do drugs, right? So the drugs didn't even have anything to do with my depression until I was older. And that rock bottom eventually led me to a treatment center. It led me to AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and sobriety. And now that sobriety, what I've learned in sobriety, I've pretty much built the company around that. Just like the key points, hanging out with positive people, trying not to letting go of resentments, especially in the trades as a business owner, whether it's pay or guys not showing up for work. Okay, he didn't show up for work. He's maybe having a bad day. Hey, oh, they're not paying me. Maybe they don't have the funds yet. I can't hold that because that'll end up bringing on resentment, anger. And when you have people working for you, you can't be angry all the time because I take my business very seriously, especially my employees. They have families. They have to put food on their plates for their families, right? And at the same time, so I got to keep a steady head. So this is what sobriety has brought. And do I have times where I feel sorry for myself? Definitely. Fortunately, after 6 years of sobriety, I don't have the urges like I used to, but I still have, we call it a dry alcoholic syndrome. So I still get the poor me, why me? I get angry if somebody doesn't listen to me. So I just have to keep up the same concept as I learned in sobriety. We believe in a higher power. I choose to call him God, and my higher power will take care of it, right? So,
Yeah.
there are other ways to work on that. So it's just staying positive. That's what it is. I've cut out all the negativity in my life, minus like social media. That's another addicting thing for me, right? I've been struggling last year based on a job that owed me some money. So then I can tell I was scrolling through Instagram like this, not even paying attention. So I was getting that alcoholic brain back, right? Maybe started telling and being honest is a huge one. Did you ever watch Seinfeld? Are you a
Mm-hmm.
Seinfeld guy? So
Yeah.
George's famous quote, "It's not a lie if you believe it." So I literally lied about everything. And I believed everything I said. So when I got sober, I was like, I'm never lying again. I'm a big on exaggerating. And I slowed that down, or I'll catch myself in that. Honesty, hard work, and positivity now are the three goals. And I've taken them every aspect of my life. I've built my business around it, and it seems like it's going well. Even like my business, when I started the drywall company 5 years ago, I wanted to build a drywall company that's different than any other trades company. The one thing I do remember from college is differentiation. When you're starting a business, you want to differentiate yourself from the competition. Even though the other drywall companies, great owners, I know a bunch of them, but I wanted to have a different drywall company with a positive atmosphere. Everyone gets along, like a family oriented company. And I've been able to achieve that so far in the last 5 years. But I wouldn't have any of this without sobriety. It's changed my life. Again, just to end on one other thing, they ask you to don't change one thing, you got to change everything. So I literally changed everything in my entire life, right? I hurt people around me based on maybe not talking to them as much anymore. But again, it's called maturity as well, right? I want to work. I have a family. I had 2 kids at home without a dad, right? And my wife, who's amazing, without a husband. I was just, even if I was there physically, I was never there mentally.
Right.
Staring off into space. And you learn the lessons and you put you always hurt the loved ones the most, right? So hopefully I can just keep on the positive run, one day at a time, though. And that's another thing, focus one day at a time.
Yeah. Which I think is a great motto in business as well, because it's so easy to get lost in like the big projections and where you'd like to be. And I found that to be really helpful for myself in that just focus on the thing in front of you, and those things that you want to have happen down the road will naturally do if I'm just focused on the present.
It's so true. So I'll just I always want to tell you a little story from my other business. We were meant to be partners, right? Our first meeting, we talked about can't wait to buy new Corvettes. And that was our first meeting. We had no money. We had nothing. But our first meeting was buying Corvettes. So now the rule is nobody's allowed to get a Denali. Every GC or trade owner buys a Denali truck. That's the one rule. We buy basic trucks, and that's what we do. Got to keep humble, right? So, but that just shows you where my head was at as a drug addict, alcoholic, compared to this now, right? Let's keep everything humble. That's the ego, especially when it comes to business. And I have a couple of mentors in business, and that's the one thing that can kill a man right there. Kill a man's business is that ego, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm curious about what have been some of the more subtle long tail or ripple effects of sobriety that's kind of surprised you. Like just those subtle things that you look back. Pardon me?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Keep finishing.
Just like, because I've noticed I've made changes in my life, probably haven't gone through as an extreme of an experience as you have, but I'm always surprised when I look back. I was like, I never expected this to happen because of that change. And I was curious about those little subtle things that have shifted for you, whether it's externally in your business or in your life, something you see, or it's just like an internal shift. But those subtle things that have changed because of sobriety that you didn't necessarily expect going into it.
For sure. The main one, or one of the main ones, is patience, right? So I expected that other businesses to turn around like that. Like I said, we're talking about Corvettes. For this business, if you see that, as long as you're growing 1% a day or 1% weekly, whatever your goals are, right? That's all you need, that progress. You're not going to be a millionaire overnight or a successful businessman overnight. We're not inventing any apps here. I'm not an app guy. The patience is very key. The clear head. So I was able to take it's exhausting being an alcoholic and an addict too, because you're just so focused on your next drink or drug. So I was able to take that energy and put it into my business instead of scoring drugs or alcohol, right? So that was another thing. When I was able to do that, I was able to put that negative into a positive and start a business without any business knowledge, really. It's hard work. So I was able to do that. And just networking, I was able, because addicts and alcoholics, they like to talk. We're pretty social people, and with the ADD and all that, so I was able to network, and that's another thing too, right? Just keeping that social. When you're drinking, you're a little bit more social, right? That's what's usually the life of the party. So I was able to kind of turn that into a sober life of the party in terms of meeting new people, shaking hands, and all that. I wish I could say I work out every day. I don't do that or anything in terms of putting that energy into exercise and healthy eating. But at the same time, I try to keep up, not indulge, because then you find new vices, right? Especially as an addict and alcoholic, is you can supplement the booze, sugar, right? So that's
Yeah.
pretty easy, especially nowadays. Definitely.
And I was curious too, having this experience, your boys were really young as you were going through this. How has this changed how you parent and how you show up as a dad?
I think honesty again is a huge thing. I'm not saying what I do. I like to take what I see from other companies, other parents, and then take what I really like and what I don't like and kind of separate them. It's one thing I believe I can do well. And the honesty to my kids, I'm not going to tell them straight up what happened to me, but I can be honest with them and not beat around the bush or anything like that. I'm not going to be, they're so young, but I can do that. I still, one of my biggest flaws is being able to sit with my kids and focus on them rather than focusing on my work. It's very tough for me, especially if I have my phone in my hand, right? So that's another thing. Also having the patience as well. So I have the patience in business, but when I go to my kids, that patience lacks. And I always think my kids, oh my God, they're the worst kids. And then I meet other kids and they're actually very good kids. I think they're great boys and we're doing a pretty decent job raising them. And we have to let them be boys too, right? They're going to be rambunctious, especially at this age, and let them kind of run around, be goofy and all that. Obviously, there has to be rules. I'm definitely not a strict parent, but the one thing I really enforce is respect, the respect thing. So I didn't respect myself before sobriety. Now I do. So now you have to respect yourself, right? There's no bullying or anything like that. You have to respect. I coach as well, and my little guy, so the U8 baseball team in Woodstock, and that's the one good thing I had. And these are 6, 7 year olds. I'm like, you have to respect the coaches, right? And all the parents came up to me and said, thank you for that. Because I don't think maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was a little softer. Everyone's allowed to do anything. I'm not yelling at the kids or anything. But you say, yes, you're not talking when the coaches are talking. You're not talking when your parents are talking. You listen, and then you have return, right? And I think that's kind of going away. I think it's coming back a bit, but it went away for the last 10, 15 years, right? If the kids can do whatever
Yeah.
they want. So the respect thing, because I still call some of my friends' parents Mr. and Mrs. I see them. I've known them for 35 years, right? You don't see that
Yeah.
anymore, right? So the
No,
respect thing.
definitely not. You said something that caught my attention there. You said respect for yourself and helping your kids have respect for themselves. How do you help them have respect for themselves and build up their self-worth? Because it's one thing to establish respecting you as a parent and a coach and setting those boundaries, but how are you doing that with them so they're respecting themselves?
So this is the toughest thing, especially because one thing, I wish I listened to my dad more because he had great advice, but I would always listen to the coaches, right? So it's tough with your own kids. You're always going to listen to their buddies' dads or other coaches, right? So trying to get them to actually listen to you, because I'm always saying something. So with that is my oldest son reminds me a lot about like me. He's very emotional. I used to be a little bit of a mental case when I lost sports. It would be the end of the world. So I tell him some stories. I'm like, I've lost many more times than I've won, whether it was sports and life and all that. So tomorrow's a new day. As long as you're giving your best effort, you don't have to win every day. And then you can get that self worth, right? Because if you're giving your best effort, it's eventually going to pan out and whatever you believe in it'll all turn into the good. You know what I'm saying? It usually will. Whether I'm not going to say you're going to be a millionaire, whatever you want to do it, but also focus on yourself. Get rid of the materialistic stuff. The materialistic stuff is, I think there's so much. I always look at friends and be like, oh, this guy has this guy has that. I didn't even really know what I wanted to do with my life. I had zero clue. So when I had zero self worth there, right? People are getting jobs, getting married, blah blah blah. And I felt sorry for myself, right? So I tell my kids, there's no rush. Stop looking at other people. You will figure it out eventually, right? Obviously, they're young, but I'm thinking about it. I just tell them, don't put so much pressure on yourself. Enjoy being a kid. And if you make a mistake, just try not to keep repeating it, right? And get that self worth. And when you look in the mirror, think positive. I would always look in the mirror and think negative about myself. And once that changed, hasn't been as bad. So again, you're a good person. And the main thing is be grateful. Gratitude is such a big thing in my life. I think that's a self-worth too, because as an only child, spoiled brat, as I always call myself, when I got a present, I would be like, oh, is there another present back there? I would never just be, I always expect more. Again, my kids are, they are spoiled kids as well, probably more spoiled than they should be. But at the same time, we look outside, especially these days, what's going on the streets. My office is right downtown Kitchener. Right downtown Kitchener. And the homeless situation is just it's getting bad, right? So especially and then even in our hometown, and we're able to be at home in the warm weather, in the warm climate, excuse me. And there are people on the streets right now. It's getting cold here. Probably not as cold. Well, I guess you're BC, right? So I guess it's probably
Yeah, it's cool. It doesn't get nearly as cold though. Yeah, it's
close
not
here,
nearly as
right?
bad.
So I tell them gratitude is so important, and I swear I didn't even know what that meant before I got sober, which is insane. But gratitude, we do a gratitude, what we're grateful for before dinner every night, and we try to. It's kind of like our prayer, and we say that just so they're aware. Again, they're not going to get it right away, but if I could plant that seed in them, right, for when they're getting to high school, once when they're starting to go on the social media, right, and all that they're not caught up in everyone else. Hopefully, they can focus on themselves. That's again, focus on yourself. It sounds selfish, but it's not at all. Because if you focus on yourself, become a good person, everyone around you will see that.
Yeah, it's the analogy of when you're in the plane, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first, so that you're taken care of, so you can put the oxygen mask on other people.
Exactly.
That's always stuck with me. And it's funny that you say the gratitude practice. So my daughter's only 2.5, but I've started with my wife. We've got a little whiteboard where we kind of track there's things that we have to do or little tasks, but there's also a section that's what are you grateful for? And I'll randomly ask her like, what are you grateful for? And we'll like write it down. So we've been doing it pretty consistently this last year. So I've got almost every week, we've got like a little section of a whiteboard with a log of all these sometimes it's super random what the little grateful fors are. But I noticed
Oh,
when we do it consistently, it does lift you up. And I'm excited to look back because part of my year-end review, I'm going to add that to my year-end review is to like go through some of those things, which I'm excited to do. And my daughter's
that's
just
actually amazing.
talking, starting to talk. My daughter's just starting to talk. So I'll ask her like, what are you grateful for? And she'll be like, bunnies or just like pasta. And I'm like, awesome. And I'll like write that down too. But there's something there. And I think like want to acknowledge that you're doing it because I think a lot of this stuff is a practice and it's modeling it for kids. And that's the way to communicate rather than saying, hey, you need to be grateful, just think differently or like do this. But when you're practicing it with them and you're modeling it and sharing it, that's the stuff that really gets embodied into them, I think, over time. So,
And again, they're not going to start doing it, starting believing it the next day, right? This comes with the patience thing. You plant the seed, and eventually, and then mean what you're grateful for. Don't just start throwing stuff out, right? Be
yeah.
actually, I'm grateful for this because of this, right? So that's why I tell my boy, I get it. It could be their new video game or whatever, because that's what they're grateful for. I'm not saying they're supposed to be Gandhi here, right? They're
Yeah.
not supposed to save the world, right? Just be that I can have this, and I'm grateful for it, right? So try to get away from materialistic things as much, but again, they're 6 and 9. So.
Yeah. I wanted to switch gears a little bit. Before we jumped on and started recording, you were sharing that your boys are playing rep hockey and other rep sports. I know that's a huge time commitment. One of the things I love asking other entrepreneur dads is like, what does the actual schedule look like? How do you break down business time versus family time? What does that look like throughout like a weekly kind of cadence of when do you start work? When do you do these things for yourself? When do you do the family stuff? Because everybody's doing it differently and there's no right way, but I think it's really helpful to get these different snapshots of what other guys are doing. And again, you can kind of like pick and choose what you like, or it might open a door that you didn't kind of consider. So I'd be curious about how you set it up now and maybe how that's changed over the last little while as your boys have gotten a bit older.
So yeah, my boys play both rep hockey, and my younger one plays rep baseball, and my older one plays rep soccer. And nowadays, if your kids play rep sports, it's full year, right? So in the winter for baseball and the soccer, they're practicing. 2 nights a week, and then soccer's pretty much, or then hockey's 4 other nights. So technically we'll go 7 days a week. 5 of those days, probably both of them have something. And then there might be one day where one of them, and then maybe a day off if we get lucky, whether it's practice, any skills, power skating, to any training that they have. And it takes a lot of time. The key is, which not everyone has, is having a partner that's on the same page as you, and communication. I am horrible with communication and all that. So she structures our life at home with the calendar. And with that, I can see and I have, actually, I use my calendar on my phone now, which is, is that a new app? It seems like I've never used it before in my life, my phone calendar. And I'm able to see what my boys have. Fortunately, she does have a career herself, right? So she's able to drive them to school. I can pick them up, take them to the early practices. She can pick them up. I get dinner ready, or she goes home, gets dinner ready. And then we come home. And since they're pretty young, they have the earlier nights of sports, right? So they don't have like the 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock practices yet. But it's all about schedule. So again, my wife puts a schedule in, and then we kind of plan what we're going to do each week. Again, fortunately, since I have been in business for 5 years, I have a little bit of, and I have a great team at work. I do have some leeway these days, which has been very helpful compared to my wife, but she gets to work at home some days. And again, it's just all about communication. And I still work on that on a daily basis. Structure and communication. It's tough, right? Because I think people can read my mind, so I don't have to talk to them constantly. But at the same time, it's keep the communication, whether it's here, work, or family, right? Or even depression too. Keep the communication. So any aspect in life, keep talking.
Yeah. So what does a typical day look like for you? Like, what time do you get up? When do you get to what's the morning look like? When do you get to the office? Do you go to the office, or are you doing field work? Like, take me through a typical day.
So right now, Mondays, we always have a shop meeting at 6:45. So I live about 30 to 45 minutes away. I live out of town a little bit. So I wake up at 5:20, 5:30. Everything's already ready to go. I get dressed, head to work, get the crew moving. That leads me into office work. So fortunately now, since I have a bigger team, I have a quality control guy. My partner, he's a general manager, so he checks out all the jobs. We recently just hired a vice president as well. And she pretty much is my older sister, we call her, because she just tells me what to do and I do it. So we got her from the corporate world. We hired her to have like the business sense, but with a small business mentality. And so my day is now condensed into the schedule that I reset. I get home around 4:30 now, and then we start the sports. And then I also have on my Mondays, I also have to focus on myself too, not just the kids. I still go to meetings for sobriety, right? So I try to do that once, maybe twice a week. I notice if I don't do that, I start veering off. So I got to keep that probably for the rest of my life, which I like. I like though. It's good for me. Right. So it's a full day, 7 days a week, pretty much.
Yeah. Awesome.
And I love it. I don't feel like I complain about it just to complain, but I do like it.
Yeah. Which is great. And I think that's one of the traps of entrepreneurship sometimes is you're the creator of your business and your lifestyle, but at some point it feels like you're not, and that you're trapped by it. And in a lot of ways, there are constraints that force you to do certain things if you want the business to continue the way that you want. But you do have a lot of influence over, and you can change it over time. And it's easy to forget that level of control or influence is still there. It's easy to kind of feel a bit of a victim of your own business if you're not careful.
Especially at the beginning of the business, right? Like the beginning is never fun, right? It's more just based on passion, right? And this is hopefully a dream and a hope, right? Like, well, maybe this will turn into something. But fortunately it did. And because it's all you, right? And then you kind of fill in the pieces as you go. I like to put a good team around me in the business like I do in life now. So I hire smarter people in areas that I'm not smart at, right? The business aspect. I can get clients, I can get work, treat people well, But in terms, I can make money, but where it goes after that, I hire someone to do that. You know what I'm saying? So, and I'm not organized, so I have a project manager that does that. So, at the beginning, I was doing everything, and we were busy, so that was kind of it was rough. It's all a learning experience, right? I didn't go to school for this, so it was just a learning experience, and just again, try not to keep making the same mistakes.
Yeah. What's a current challenge for you, either life or business? What's one of the current things you're trying to figure out or overcome?
A couple things of the business. Our biggest kind of negative in the last year in my career of Class Drywall has been we unfortunately stopped getting paid from a job, and it was six figures, mid six figures, and so we had to lean the job. And again, we're a decent sized company, but mid six figures for any company is a lot of money, right? So that was, and then I take that personally. So it always goes from business to work. And I fell into a little bit of a depression. Well, not little, but I fell into depression. I'm sober. That didn't matter because I started thinking my old ways, right? And that was a rough one. So fortunately, the lean was taken off. We're starting the job back again, and it's all working out. Knock on wood. But again, it was from last January, and what is it, December now? We just started back, so it's been. And I have an ego on myself that since I was a failure before in business, I wanted to do everything myself. So I didn't borrow any money. I just made my own money, used my own money to build this company. So again, you can't do that forever. So now obviously I have to use the bank and scavenge up some money. But that is the toughest part is leaving for me is leaving my business and my work
Mm.
at the office because everyone will know if I'm miserable from work. Usually the days are usually positive now, but at the same time, if I'm miserable at home, it's because of work. So especially with that, or the things I always get really angry about. I don't know if this is an ego thing, but if you don't pay, obviously, because again, we always make sure I'm a very humble guy. If we screw up, back charge, you do whatever you want. I can be honest with my mistakes, right? I'm not here to catch every penny or collect every penny. But don't rip me off. I get so angry and don't bad talk us if you don't deserve it, right? Just everyone, because I get so angry about that. Like, don't be bad mouthing us because we are very, very professional on the job site, off the job site. So if I do that, that's when the anger kicks in. And yeah, I take that home, right? And my kids are so young, they don't want to see this, right? I remember when my parents argued. I remember that more than, even though they didn't argue that much, but I still have the remember my wife always says she's always right, obviously, so she's like stop getting angry. So I try to take it outside and all that, but again sometimes I just get so frustrated. It's not the end of the world, right? That's another thing, and that's one thing I can do is I can network, and if this fails I can probably get a job somewhere else, so it's not technically the end of the world. Maybe it's not meant to be. So if it fails it fails, but again since I started it I take it a little. It's my third kid like we talked about.
Yeah.
In our
Yeah. The business being the other child.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough. I have a lot of pride in this company, right? That's why if you talk smack about it and you don't pay me, I will go
Yeah. You get
nuclear.
protect. It's just
Again,
like a kid. You get protective of it.
100%. You're
You've
getting bullied,
invested
right?
so much time and energy in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I
It's
didn't
so
have a
funny how
perfect
that.
wife, I should be divorced technically. Not even because of the sobriety part, is because of that first 3 years is all work. There's no personal time. I go home, I work. I go to sleep. I'm working till 4 in the morning. 1 in the morning, I wake up at 5. But mom, keep going. And I think
What was like, take me back and give me a snapshot of like the toughest days or like a specific really tough period that you got through.
well, the toughest was literally over this last year. So at the beginning of 2024, and my dad just passed away too. So that was a rough one because I was really close with my dad, and my kids loved my dad, right? And that was their first big death, the
Hmm.
loss, I should say. Yeah. So and then I found out we're owed. The company is not paying us money. What we're owed. It was slow. Ontario, especially in the construction, we were steady, but fortunately, the previous 4 years we were booming. My revenue growth gained 25% every year. It was great, but we were steady. I didn't have to lay anyone off. So, but if I'm owed all that money, I need to increase sales to kind of make up for it, right? And I wasn't able to do that because we were just slow. The country was slow, right? Especially Ontario. No one's building houses. Commercials a little slower, and at the same time, I have to keep people working. I'm owed all this money, and I was fighting my ego of borrowing money too because I was just like, let's just keep pushing and pushing. I fell into that deep depression, and and I don't think I really coped with my dad's death. Like I worked the next day, and
Mm.
that's something I just it was pretty much my first big loss because my mom's still alive, and I just that's how I kind of masked it, right, with work, right? So I was able to mask that, and I kind of all just hit at once, and yeah, just a big depression. And fortunately, I've surrounded myself with the good people, right? Again, I have so many outlets that I can go to if I'm feeling down, and I couldn't pick up the phone and call one of them. That's the situation I was in, and
Yeah.
I know that's the answer, but I just couldn't do it, and that's probably the most frustrating. It's like I know all I have to do is I have a sponsor, a mentor, talk to my wife, obviously, anybody at work, anybody, right? So, but I was unable to even call out. So, fortunately, I've been able to work on that and get back into it, and just think positive. But yeah, this last year was the toughest of my sobriety and business for personal reasons and business reasons. Like when we started, it was all just cash. Like we were, COVID was, and I hate to say this, but COVID was great to us, right? Because you know how busy the construction industry was,
Hmm.
and we were just starting, and you had the bigger drywall companies, but they were so busy, we were able to take the smaller jobs and kind of build our way up, right? And I loved it. I was on the tools. Now I'm not on the tools, but I was healthy, working, seeing the money in the bank account go. But then the bigger you get, the expenses obviously increase. And when it's that big job, see, that's the toughest part of business. Whether it's just the way I am with the addiction mentality, addict mentality, I can't stop and just stay where I am level. I have to keep growing. So I take these big jobs, and I hit that one job that didn't pay, right? So and I was always warned about it because that ruins
Yeah.
companies, right?
It
Fortunately, I
can't.
was
Yeah.
able
It's,
to, yeah,
yeah.
it
I was
especially with,
curious. Yeah. I was curious about the depression. Like a lot more guys deal with it than we know because they don't talk about
oh,
it or they
yeah.
push it down. How did you get through that? And what would you say to somebody that might be experiencing some of that, maybe not to the same degree, but what would you be sharing with them as how to get through that when you can't pick up the phone or it feels too hard to do that? Like, what would you share with yourself?
Have so since I was unable to pick up the phone, and this only happened probably like 2 months ago at this point, so it's very recent, and have the people, again, I've said this a couple times already, to have the proper people around you. So I was at my house, and I couldn't get out of bed, and my wife was obviously worrying about me. So my sponsor just showed up to my house one day. Unfortunately, he knew where I lived because I wasn't answering the phone, and he just came and said, "Jeff, we're doing this, this, this." And the toughest thing is I don't like being told what to do either. So that was a tough one. So right, so especially when you're depressed, and I listened to him, and then so any advice is have those people that you know will be there in your hardest situation, right? Not a buddy, you need the friends, you know? Like I had a lot of buddies when I was partying, but I only had a couple of friends, right? And I think, like we said in the pre-talk, is surround yourself by like-minded people because those people will help you before anyone else, right? Because they care about you. And you can do that. If you can't pick up the phone, whether it's depression or even the suicidal thoughts, use the resources that you can. I'm very open about this for a reason because, especially in the construction industry, the suicide rate for men is more men, obviously, in construction is very high. But in general, in North America, suicide rate for men, I think it's every 3 out of 4 people that commit suicide are men, and it's crazy, right? And no one really believes that or actually listens to those numbers, but in the end, we are suffering, whether it's we're putting the pressure on ourselves too much, right, to keep the family afloat, or putting pressure to get a good job, or keeping people happy, or keeping yourself happy. But if you can just use the resources and have the people around you, and that will come to you if in the need, which I had, right? Because as well as will be able to come to you if you reach out to them. So use the resources. Again, it's tougher than it sounds, but
Yeah.
people will listen if you're struggling,
Yeah.
especially nowadays, right? So it's getting better.
Yeah, I think it is. There's more exposure. People are talking about it more. I think there's still a long way to go, but there's progress, which is good. So I have a couple questions just to wrap us up here. The first is, what is the legacy that you're hoping to leave your kids by being an entrepreneur dad? And I'll extend that beyond. Maybe just like the legacy you want to leave your kids by being who you are and the journey that you've had.
The legacy I want to leave. So when I started this company, my sponsor, and he was a successful home builder in town, and he said, when you start this company, don't do it for money, do it for a purpose. I always remember that. And I want to be able to leave the legacy of I was able to not have a successful company business wise, but I was able to help people in need. And I'm able to do that now we throw a golf tournament that goes to the treatment center I went to. We're able to raise money for that. And I want my kids to realize that their dad, even though I'm a loudmouth and all that, I'm a big talker and all that. I was able to help people in need. I think that's, again, I think if you do that selfishly, it's rewarding as well, right? Because you're helping other people. Because I was given a second chance in life and a second chance with my family. And if I can give people that second chance and my kids know that I was able to do that, I think that's a legacy. Not in terms of successful business or anything like that, but I was able to maybe help somebody turn their life around. And that's my goal.
What's a question you would like to ask other dadpreneurs? I'm going to be doing more of these interviews. Let's say you got to interview some more guys. What would be some of the questions or things that you'd want to hit on or understand or learn from them?
Okay, so that's a good question. So there's a couple of things. A couple months ago, so like I said, I coach baseball, and I asked one of the dads, like, "What are you doing in your last? When it was summertime, what are you doing in your last week of holidays?" He's like, "I'm gonna hang out with my kid, obviously, because that's the best thing I can do." And I could not relate to that question or that answer. I was just like, "You're gonna hang out with your kids for fun and just hang out with them all week?" So how do you get to that point if you are able to do it? And I'm not saying obviously selfishness on my end, but if I'm not doing what I want to do with my kids, it's tough, right? If I'm not playing baseball or golf or taking them fishing, it's tough, right? So how are dads able to sit down, even not even entrepreneur dads in general, sit down and enjoy hanging out with their kids without doing what they want to do? That's a big one for me because I find that it's just amazing how some people can do that, especially dads. Moms, it seems like they're a little easier. They just enjoy being a mom. And dads are probably a little bit more selfish in that sense, especially as an entrepreneur because we have goals, right, in the business. And the other one is just how are you able to keep business at the office and the family and separate the two? I think that's my biggest struggle. I am getting better, but if you can separate business and family, any advice on that would be helpful, especially for me, because again, it's still a struggle.
Yeah, thanks for that. And then my final question is, 6 months from now, you get to listen to this podcast recording and you get to leave advice for yourself. What's the one thing you'd want to remind yourself of? That'd be an important kind of takeaway or thing you feel like you might need to hear again and again.
Don't put so much pressure on yourself. Enjoy what you're doing. I think enjoy the journey, right? I don't think we do that as entrepreneurs so much. We don't enjoy every second. We're just so focused on the end game, whatever that it may be. I don't even have one really, right? I don't care if I'm a multimillionaire or anything like that. I don't even have that goal. I just enjoy what I'm doing, but I don't enjoy what I'm doing. It's a lot of stress and pressure. Would I do anything else? No. But I would tell myself, sit back, relax, and enjoy what you're doing and realize you're doing a good job, right? And actually take that in, not in an ego way, but look what you've created. It's kind of cool. Because I never thought, like, I always usually tear up when I think about stuff. I say, I find this incredible that I have 16 people that actually want to work with me. It's insane. Before, people didn't want to, when I was drinking, no one wanted to be around me. But now I actually have people from like big corporate jobs joining our company, females and males and everyone from any ethnicity, right? I have everything. It's awesome. I'm just, that's something I'm very grateful for. I didn't thought I would have, right? That people actually want to hang out with me and work with me.
And it's inspiring to hear that story too, because it's an example of what's possible. And
100%, yeah.
Right? Like other people need to hear, it's like, oh, it is possible. The thing I want, like, yeah, it's inspiring. Thank you for joining us. Loved our chat. Where can people find you if they want to reach out or touch base with you? What would be the best way?
You can check us out at classdrywall.com. Instagram is Class Drywall Inc. Check out our new projects. We're actually building in Kitchener the new homeless shelter, that's our biggest project right now. And again, that's a pretty cool project, especially I could have been there, so it kind of hits our family pretty close, and we can help out someone in that sense. That's a big project, and check it out. We usually do updates on a weekly basis. So. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for coming on.